Question number 11, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Point of order, the Right Honourable.
Speaker, I seek to table Section 7 of the Intelligence and Security Committee Act 1996, which totally rebuts the Prime Minister's statement that Mr Dunn had to...
Order. We don't table bits of legislation in this Parliament. Order. The member will ask his question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Did he discuss, as Prime Minister and head of the GCSB, with David Henry the requirement for Mr Henry to see the full unedited electronic record connected with the Kitteridge report leak? If not, why not?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, and there I was thinking he was going to table the emails. No, I did not speak with Mr Henry during the proceedings of the inquiry.
Speaker, I know he wants to see them.
Is the member...
My point of order is very clear.
Is it a point of order?
Yes, could he possibly just answer the question? Rather than act like a giggling schoolboy.
That's a very acceptable point of order. Would the Prime Minister please address the question?
I did not speak with Mr Henry during the proceedings of the inquiry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would the member, Honourable Clayton Cosgrove, stand, withdraw and apologise?
Withdraw and apologise.
Thank you. Prime Minister.
Okay, sorry, for the third time, Mr Speaker, I did not speak with Mr Henry.
Point of order, Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Could you advise me understanding orders when a minister begins a question which is outside standing orders? Is it incumbent upon the questioner or another member to raise that breach, or is it incumbent upon you to act in your own right to call the minister to account?
It depends on the circumstances. Now, in this case, because we've now got such a disjunction between the question being asked and the answer, I'm going to ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister to start with the question again. I apologise again. Order.
Many a true word and jest.
Order. Order. Now we'll return to some normality. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, is being called to ask question number 11.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, did he discuss...
Order.
Did he discuss with David Henry the requirement for Mr Henry to see the full unedited electronic record connected with the Kitteridge report leak? If not, why not?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I did not speak with Mr Henry during the proceedings of the inquiry.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If that is the case, why was Mr Henry able to say that, with respect to this inquiry, he was acting with, quotes, the support of the Prime Minister? End of quotes.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because we set the terms of inquiry.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
I have. When the Prime Minister set up this inquiry, did he intend for it to get to the whole truth?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, that was certainly my aim, and I think what the inquiry has demonstrated is that a minister has paid a very high price by resigning from his portfolio.
Point of order.
Speaker, my question is very clear. It asks the Prime Minister that when he set the inquiry up, did he intend to get to the whole truth? Not the ramifications of what happened in the inquiry, but that simple question.
The Prime Minister very adequately addressed the question. Does the member have further supplementaries? Or the member can ask them.
Prime Minister, what was the Prime Minister's response to Mr Henry when Mr Henry informed him, as he surely did either in person or by that report, that Mr Dunn would not cooperate in releasing all of his electronic records?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, for the purposes of clarification, at no stage have I had a discussion with Mr Henry. I've seen his report, as the member noted. Mr Speaker, clearly I wanted to ensure that all people that were subject to the inquiry engaged fully, and that was why my Chief of Staff sent out a email to SPSs ensuring that they and other people around them complied with the inquiry. That's why Mr Kibblewhite sent a report to everybody that was being subject to the inquiry, instructing them to comply.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If Mr Henry felt confident that he would have had the appropriate powers from the State Services Commissioner, why did he not give Mr Henry the appropriate powers as the Prime Minister?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Was the member
Could the member repeat the question?
Order.
If Mr Henry, investigator appointed by the Prime Minister, refers to, and specifically page 2, number 7.7, that he had confidence he had the appropriate powers if he wanted them from the State Services Commissioner, why did the Prime Minister, because he was dealing with ministers, not give this investigator the appropriate powers to get to the full truth?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, because the Minister firstly was a support party minister, but it would be the same actually probably for any minister. It's not my practice of going through their emails any more than it would be my practice of going through a journalist's emails like Andrea Vance. What I do expect them to do, though, is comply with the inquiry, and that was why it was the instruction to comply was made quite clear. If a minister didn't comply, then that speaks for itself. But in reality, Mr Peters doesn't need this. Mr Peters has the emails, so he tells us he can just read them out.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Why did the Prime Minister... Oh, it's going so good now, isn't it?
Order. Can the member just ask the supplementary question?
You know...
Order.
Nancy over there said I was bluffing.
Order. Would the member please ask his question? I'd be grateful if there weren't the interjections coming from the right-hand side of the House.
Supplementary question. Yes. Why did the Prime Minister not give Mr Henry... The Speaker, I can't actually ask this question while with all this hysterical laughing down the back.
Order.
Nervous as it is.
I think Mr Peters and I would all appreciate if there would be less interjection coming from the right-hand side of the House so we can have the supplementary question asked. Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Why did the Prime Minister not give Mr Henry the power to access all of Mr Dunn's electronic records when it became necessary for Mr Henry to access those records to get to the truth, knowing as he did that it was the records that the inquirer needed, not publication after he had got the information?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Quite simply, Mr Speaker, because Mr Henry didn't ask for more powers. So at the end of the day, I think everyone can see for themselves that if a minister fails to comply with an inquiry, then that has serious ramifications. It has had serious ramifications. Well, Mr Peters knows because he's got all the emails, remember? He can read them.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Mr Speaker, why are you allowing the Prime Minister to behave like that?
Order. Order. It is a point. Well, it is meant to be a point of order, and therefore will be heard in silence. But I don't.
To constantly demand of a member of Parliament that he fulfil the duties that the Prime Minister is responsible for.
Order.
It's not within standing orders.
Order. The question is whether the question for me to ascertain is whether the question asked by the member, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, was adequately addressed, and I believe it was. The member may have further supplementaries. Has he? Yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Why is the Prime Minister standing in this House and saying that he is falling short of finding out the truth, the whole truth, which he said at the start he wanted when he set the inquiry up? Or is he just embarrassed by what's in all 5 sets of electronic records and points out his incompetence?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, firstly, the inquiry was set up in such a way for expediency to make sure that it was quick and that we could get a result. We actually know that where an inquiry has gone to positions of oath, for instance, and the likes, it's taken a long time. It's before the courts, and actually the opposition's criticised it, remember? So basically, Mr Speaker, this was a document that was not distributed to that many people, about 30-odd in total. My view was that Mr Henry had wide-ranging powers. In fact, the Minister has resigned because he's failed to comply with those. So, well, he has failed to comply, and that, and as I've said publicly on many times, says something about Mr Dunn, but in the end it's for him to comply.
Question number 12, John Hayes.
The Minister of Customs.